All right, welcome to day two of our Service Dog Handler Symposium. We're getting off to a bit of a late start due to some technical difficulties, but it's all good and we're going to figure it out. Today's focus is all on welfare and team welfare for service dog teams, including the dog and the human. Yesterday's focus, we were heavily focused on human handler emotions. So today we're going to kind of switch and focus a little bit more heavily on the dog side of the team. But as you know, everything that we do involves teamwork. So to kick us off, we're going to kind of talk a little bit about the conversation of communication that flows both ways. And so if you listen to any of the presentations, I know the Zoom is kind of early and you may not have had a chance yet. But if you listen to any of the presentations, you probably heard us talking about how it's as important to listen to the dog as it is that the dog listen to us, right? We need to make sure that we are aware of what they are telling us in all situations. Rosee, I'll let you go ahead and start. So let's look at the idea of how do you know when your dog or other dogs that you've worked with are communicating something of need to you?
Well, I mean, dogs have a whole repertoire of signs that they give, like when they're not very happy about something or they're thinking about something, from quite small signs like blinking or just showing a little bit of white in the eye or lip licking. They may make themselves slightly small. It depends on what kind of context this happens with. But I find also that the more we respond appropriately to our dog's conversation and communication, the more they will actually communicate with us. Yeah, and each dog uses a little bit sort of different things out of this repertoire. I have just adopted a dog from a shelter. This was 3 months ago. He spent his entire 6 years in this shelter and is extremely shy. He will tend to kind of put his ears back. He will even put the sort of classic, really put his tail right between his legs. If he hears a sound, he's quite sound sensitive. So if he hears a sound that he doesn't know where it's coming from or what it means, he can be very startled. And I'm gaining his trust. The thing is that first of all, we need to recognize that, and then we need to learn how to respond appropriately. So that, to help your dog to always be there for your dog, so they have trust that they don't have to deal with these things on their own. So I can say, okay, well, let's go a little bit further away there, or you can come a little bit nearer to me. It depends on what makes the dog feel safe, and that can be different for every dog. And that's the wonderful thing about it, isn't it? That they're all individuals. And so we want to have a really good and respectful two-way relationship with them. Yeah. Great question, Penny.
All
What's your
right. So Scott, just kind of give us some easy, signals, things that you key in on when your dogs are trying to tell you they have a need.
So, um, things that I look for with the dogs is it's not always the fear response, but I know understanding dogs are more social, they're going to look for cues that are going to help them. And it's usually how do they look for de-stressing? Is their parasympathetic nervous system kicking in? Do they need water? Gills around the mouth, the softer eyes, the sad look, which we know is one of those that makes you go, oh, but also understand that it's something that helps them recover from stress or they're needing recovery from stress. And then I don't mean like negative stress. I mean like even playing is stress because it puts a toll on the body. Um, when they pause, when they stop, they're not leaving. They're not. There's the quieter things we need to look for, and it's things that they might need help with. And I'll ask, um, Did the dog go and sniff on the ground? Is it mostly sniffing on the ground? Is it not just sniffing for education, learning the environment, or is it actually sniffing because it was too stimulated? Is a dog walking slower to around us when they're something's making it uncomfortable in the environment? Is it do they know they have that safety that they can use those behaviors that's ingrained in them? Um, do they want you to join them? It's things that, knowing dogs are social creatures, um, that they're going to look for little things to see if you're helping them in their environments. Nobody likes to do this alone. Some animals are taught to do it alone, but I look for the more softer, not always softer, but quieter signs of, can you help me? Or I'm uncomfortable. So, because, sometimes it's not as obvious, but working in doggy daycares has helped me look for a lot of the little things.
So one of the things that I have been aware of and try to help educate my clients is that there are a lot of things that, like, me as a dog trainer or the friendly stranger that is approaching your dog is going to see, because they're generally looking at, like, the face on view or maybe a side view, something like that. Whereas a dog owner, a lot of times our dogs are walking out in front of us or maybe a little bit beside us. But so if they're out in front of us sniffing and whatnot, we're going to see things from the back end. So what I notice in my dogs when I'm walking my dogs tends to be their tail position, how bouncy their body is compared to how more stiff their body is. Not that it ever really gets stiff, but those little things from the back end. But when a dog is walking toward me, I'm going to look at more of the facial features and ears and things like that. So it's just kind of that importance to remember what you perceive of your dog, um, may be totally different than what other people are perceiving. So if somebody else is looking at your dog, they're going to see different things. So it's not that it's a judgment, it's not that it's a compromise, but it's just the way of the world. Any of us walks into a different room, the same room, we're all going to see something different in that room based on our prior experiences. And it's the same thing for our dogs. When they walk into an environment, they're going to see something different than, or hear something different, smell something different than another dog, unless they're working together. So our goal as teamwork is to get that work together so that we know when our dogs are talking to us. And I mean, we're probably preaching to the choir a little bit on this one with service dog handlers, as most of them know a little bit about their dog, but the importance of listening to their dog. So one of the big conversations we've had, like within the conversation with Daniel Beck, was having a way for your dog to be able to tell you they need out of a situation without going into the full blown, barky, lungy, I'm stressed signals, without going into that signal. Is there a minor signal that they can give you that says, I'm done, I need a break, I need out, whatever, that type of thing. So, looking at that bigger perspective of what dogs might be telling us, not just naturally, but how we can teach them to communicate in certain ways. I know many of the people here have medical alert dogs. So a good example of that might be, we teach our dog to alert us when a medical issue is coming by doing a specific behavior. It could be a nose boop, it could be a jump on us, it could be, a million and one different behaviors, right? Anything a dog can do. But so that's a way of communication that we teach. Have you done anything with teaching? Most of us also teach our dogs, tell us when they need to go outside to potty, right? Unless we have a doggy door, most of us teach our dogs to let us know when you have to go potty. Have you focused on anything else that you find, like from a welfare perspective, that you think is important that your dog can tell you what they need? Scott, let's start with you since we started with Rosee before.
Yeah, actually the boops. Yeah, when the even sometimes more dramatic eye contact, um, when they're trying to look for you, or they're doing something a little bit more, geez, excuse me, a little more high energy. Sorry. a little bit more animated, not necessarily high energy, but a little more animated, especially if you're like going potty, if you can't fully pay attention, or you're in a store and looking for something. I'm just in my head, I just got Home Depot because I just read an article on Home Depot. So, as big as those stores are, and you could picture anything else, but where you're frustrated, the dogs can show you something. Because like a lot of the dogs that I work with, um, I try and get the dogs to show the parents that they need out. So we use that where the dogs can show you, hey, I need out too. And it's subtle. Like for the people, it's a little bit more controlled for them to tell the people to get out. They're their handlers to get out. And for them, they're a little bit more dramatic because they're taking in something that's making them uncomfortable. And it may not be something with us, and we may not be able to handle it right, look at it the same way. Um, so the dogs get to do it a little bit more animately for themselves, because a lot of times the people um, aren't fully paying attention to their dogs. They're busy focused on doing something they have to do for their own physical, emotion, doctor's appointments, gotta, because this trigger stack. So they're not fully paying attention to their dog signs. So I let the dogs be a little bit more animated when they need them to leave. When they're a little bit more subtle with the dogs, they can be a little more forceful as far as like pushing or touching. But I like my dogs to, maybe they'll make more eye contact with the person. Maybe they'll turn around and try to stop the person, or push up against them a lot more with a lot more pressure. And a lot of the dogs do this type of stuff more naturally, because they don't really want to take the eye off the thing that makes them fearful. But a lot of them will, just to say, hey, we got to go. That way we can say, all right, good, we're going. So there's not really a chance for the human to second guess themselves. You can say, all right, we're done, we're going. Because we already have that. A lot of the humans that I've dealt with are more upset, can get triggered fairly easily. And it's not that they get triggered fairly easily, it's just a lot of the things they have to deal with are just very important to them. And if they've got to do a lot in one day, and when they can't get to all that, or something sets them back, it's just that domino effect. So I want to make sure that they listen to their dog and they just go, you know what, we're doing it. Versus, we can wait, give me 10 more minutes, I just want to go do this. They feel like they have the patience to do it, so they go, oh, we're leaving. Because those 5-10 minutes is probably going to save them a couple hours on what they got to do next. If they can get to their dog's needs, we're going to be able to recover a lot faster. We're going to be able to, and a human will recover. And that's really what we want our dogs to do. So you got to have
And
emotional support both
that's
ways.
exactly it. Yeah. That basic kind of communication of if we can help them, get to what they need, they can help us get to what we need. It flows both ways. So that's really important in the service dog world. Rosie, do you have anything you want to add to that, or do you want me to go on to the next topic?
No, I think that's a great way of describing it. And I don't actually teach particular cues or behaviors for this, because I find that by responding appropriately, which is what Scott seems to be teaching, your clients, and we're all trying to, by responding, and say, usually it's about distance seeking. If we take the example of exiting a situation, if you're responding and providing that, your dog will learn to communicate more. That's my experience. It's also interesting to see the dog that I have just adopted, Vincent. He even just 3 months ago, he was not used to people responding to him because he was alone. So he was quite reserved, and he was communicating, but very subtly. And now his communication is getting a little bit more overt. And even it's sort of simple things like coming into the kitchen and just saying, could I have a piece of dry toast or something? That wouldn't have occurred to him a few months back because nobody had ever responded to that. So I tend not to teach particular behaviors because I don't need them in my everyday life, but by responding like that to our dog's needs, they simply communicate more and in more detail. Don't you think, Scott?
I'm jumping on here. Sorry to Penny interrupt. Sue, absolutely. And when I mean teach, I mean, like you said, respond, because a lot of these dogs do not know that they have that option, or if they've ever used it, people have ignored it and they don't know when to use it again. So us being able to respond to those, like you absolutely have it 100%. Respond to them and they go, it's almost like they go, oh, you like me. You listen to me. And you're like, I do. I'm not going to push it. And they start to want to ask for those behaviors more and show us more subtly, because a lot of dogs, they don't get that anymore. I have fully 1000% exactly, like you should have gone first.
And it's so exciting. No, I wouldn't have thought about it if you hadn't mentioned that. But it starts to open up a world because once they start to communicate with us like that, then they start to include us in things that they find interesting. And they were, I had a whippet girl who's unfortunately passed away now, but she was very communicative. She would come and say, I found something. And then I'd follow her and she would show me what she'd found. And that was thrilling for her. And that's connection, isn't it? I mean, that is connection, safety, love, everything's in there. Yeah.
Very much so. I have one dog asking me to play right now and another one asking me to go outside. Thankfully, I have a helper. So, but yeah, it's that whole idea of they know when and how to show that they have a specific need. And then us as handlers being able to either address that need, and then also sometimes it may be, I can't do that right now. Like I can't play with my dog right now. I played with her before we settled down. Just so happens that today I'm in my home office versus my office at work, and she struggles a little bit more with settling down when I'm on Zoom here, right? So I'm sitting right by her toy box, is why she keeps asking to play. But so those little things can make a huge difference, and then sometimes we do have to tell our dog, "I'm sorry, we can't do that right now. We'll get to it in 5 minutes," and it does depend on, like, that teamwork element you have and what the need is. So for me, and I know, Rosie is big on this and so is Scott, is that if it's a safety concern, that it's always right now. If
Yeah.
there's safety element involved in any way, shape, or form, if the dog doesn't feel safe, or if we don't feel safe, it's a need that we can't put off for 5 minutes, right? If it's a play with me and we know we've played with them and we know that they can settle, they just need a little bit of help, then maybe we can help them calm down versus actually meet the need that they're asking for, right? We know they have a different need and we have to help them get there. So let's talk about that a little bit from the welfare side of things and I know Rosie and I were having a conversation ahead of time about physical exercise, right? And how various people sometimes do it and how they often forget to look at the welfare side of things. So I mean the whole idea of when we're looking at welfare, what are some of those things that maybe we need to, yes, listen to our dog, but lead them in the direction that they're not, a different direction than what they're asking to go. Anybody want to jump in on that, Scott or Rosie? And
Well,
I can give some more examples as well because that's something that I deal with a lot. So a lot
I,
of my
I
clients, when they first enter the training center, and I'm sure this is common for dogs around the world, when they first enter a training center environment, they they're super excited and elevated. They're happy to be there, right? They're not really in that mindset of, okay, I'm going to get to work and learn. Dogs don't think that way. They're not going into the situation of, oh, I'm going here to learn, right? That's the human aspect. So when they come in, they're amped up, but can we get them to learn really quickly when they're that amped up? Not typically. And we want to get them in a learning mode. So we're not just going to force them into a learning mode, right? We're going to gently steer them into an avenue of where they are capable of learning. So depending on what that dog's needs may be, it might be play with my dog for a little bit. It might be have some free sniffy time to explore the training room a little bit. It might be, can the owner just sit down and calmly brush and pet the dog for a few minutes or provide the dog some other kind of stimulation in that situation? So helping to take the dog from where they're at to where we really want them to be on an emotional scale. And I know, Scott, you do this a lot. So do you have any guidance or feedback there about how we can improve the way we do that a little bit?
Um, well, you've given the training center, recognize that in the training center is great, and being able to guide the humans to understand that they're coming in and you already have the mindset of they're not gonna learn. Let them do what they need to do because they're showing us what they need. It could have been a long car ride on the way over or a bus ride or whatever. So they need a de-stress. Maybe they didn't get any cuddles from their parents, and this is a safer place for the up until they left home to here, or they've been busy all day and they're rushing to the training center. So we can see what the dogs truly need, and absolutely that. And in the training center provides that. Sorry, my back's hurting a little bit, and I already took my medicine. So, um, but yeah, like when I tell people when we go to do stuff, I always, like I say, I look for more of the subtle social signs that they need us or they need to de-stress. Like a lot of dogs that want to play don't always want to play. They just really happy to see us and want to connect with us. So let them know that, hey, which one do you want to have? And they'll choose usually cuddling and then play a little bit. A lot of dogs that are fearful will still try to show us they're fearful without having to act out. Um, but as far as like you said, it's when we start looking for the signs they need to connect or de-stress to get back to being social, we can help them a lot more. Like I tell people, does your dog look like it's ready for action, or they look like they're ready to rest and recover? Because that's two parts of the autonomous nervous system that we can negatively influence on accident. If the dog's wanting to come over for rest and we hype them up and get all excited to go play and learn, we're actually causing we can accidentally cause frustration, and we can also accidentally emotionally um, overwork our dogs emotionally because they're coming in for rest, which means they're coming in for recovery, they're coming in for connection, to so emotionally feel vulnerable, and then we amp them up again, which means their own emotional regulation is kicked in. Their body and brain has said this is what I need, but in order for me to pay attention, in order for them to get their needs met, I amp them up and we reward them and thank you for coming, or all this, thanks for the recall, thanks for the sit, thanks for anything else. And I'm like, the dog just wanted to cuddle. The dog just wants to sit with you. That's all you got to do. And sometimes that's just enough to get them to want to learn or to want to like recover enough to, okay, now what do we need to do now that I'm back with you? Um, yeah, as far as when they're excited, we go out to the parking lot and we'll let them potty. We'll let them run on the leash. We'll let them play on the leash. We'll play tug, and then they go to the bathroom. Once I'm able to see the parasympathetic nervous system kick in a little bit more, like they don't have to be calm. That's not what I want. I just want the stimulation, that edge to be taken off. And again, it could be for 100 different reasons. Maybe who knows? That doesn't matter. But if I can see they're ready for action, and we'll work with that action together. So then maybe they'll want to relax. We'll play bitey game, your bitey game. We'll play. So if they're social, cool. They're asking for me. If they're bringing me a ball, if they're bouncing around, okay, we need some more intense play. We might have to settle, and then it's gonna be longer to settle down. But if it's a bitey play, okay, cool. They're still wanting to be social. Take the edge off with me, and we don't have to do a whole lot. But if they're trying to play tug on a leash, there's a lot of emotional tension there. Okay, we're going to have to work through that. And maybe we're not going to be able to get into doing what we need to do, or maybe not as long. If we're going to the store or trying to grab some groceries, we might have to wait till later on, or maybe not even take the dog. because who knows, maybe they played too much and had too much fun with their roommate or their bestie, or just holding too much frustration, and now they're finally able to de-stress themselves. So there's multiple aspects of it. But then we also got to be able to check to see if they're actually feeling good enough, and if they're too busy trying to show us dramatically that they're not feeling good. Because a lot of times, a lot of dogs, they don't get to, like Rosee said very well, um, nobody's listened to them. The dogs have had to adapt to the humans' communication style, and it's always been, good job, this, don't do this, hyper. And so the dogs have to adapt to the humans. Oh, hey, if you have to be hyper, then I guess I have to be hyper to meet my needs to calm down.
Yeah.
So now pay attention to me. I'm all excited, which is completely different needs, and it's going to take longer to meet those needs. So yeah, I look for the different little subtle things that they try to communicate, and to help them, like Rosee says, know that they're going to be heard, know that they're going to be acknowledged, and it's going to work for them.
Rosie, do you have anything that you want to add to that?
Well, no, I think that for a long time, and maybe this is changing now, I hope so, but for a long time in the dog world, an excited dog was often confused with a dog who's having fun. I think that this is quite a major problem because it sort of stands in the way of really seeing what's going on. I think sometimes when we humans have fun, maybe we go to a ball game or we go and, I don't know, whatever we do, we say, oh, it was so exciting. That's really fun. But a lot of dogs who are getting aroused or sort of excited are not having fun. They can be overwhelmed, they can be overtired, and all the things that as Scott has been into. What I look for is that what I aim for is that our two-way communication with between me and the dog is possible. If the dog is all over the place, we're not actually really communicating with each other anymore. So the two-way communication means that I'm able to influence the dog, whether that means teaching something or doing something together, and the other way around, that the dog knows that I'm influenceable as well. Okay, so if that isn't happening, then I tend to ask, what is it that's not right here? It can be the environment. A lot of times, one thing that I do when I start working with dogs is I find the sort of environment that dogs feel comfortable in. Often dogs don't feel comfortable in very, very wide open spaces because they feel very exposed. You'll often see a dog who sort of starts to get slower and slower and that kind of thing. So I try and find an environment that feels safe for them, but they can think. Then I look into also how much sleep they're getting, how much undisturbed, really restorative sleep the dog is getting, because a lot of dogs don't get really enough, or they don't have a place to retire to where they're away from, they get that chance to recover, right? It's a great word that Scott uses. So we want our dogs to be able to recover. And it does.
It's a really big one in the service dog world because we ask a lot of them, right? We put our dogs in a lot of really stressful situations. And if we're not taking the time to give them that recovery time, that downtime, and yes, we can say, yeah, they just went to a doctor's office and they slept through the exam, but that sleeping wasn't necessarily rest and recovery sleep. That was catching a few quick winks when we could, exhaustion type. This is it. I'm safe. I can sleep for a few seconds, but it's not the full recovery kind of rest. So making sure that we are giving them that time, whether it be sleep or whether that be, sniffy adventures. I know Rosee and is much like me, very into the long line sniffy adventure type thing. So, and I know Scott is too. Um, most of our
I'm very into facilitating the dog as much as possible, being able to practice natural behaviors, which is basically, I mean, basically the natural behavior of an particularly an adult dog is to explore the environment at their own pace, using all their senses. Yeah. So I think one of the great presents that we can give our dogs is time to do that and space without sort of rushing them along. And the other thing is then to chance to develop their natural talents. One of the first things that I did with Vincent when I adopted him is that I wandered along, I went and found some water places, you know, sort of little river and stuff, and kind of asked him, if you like, do you like water? Do you like wading in water? And he loves that, as it turns out. It doesn't excite him. He wades like a child in Wellington boots, and that's really nice. So, kind of looking for things that dogs naturally like to do. He also loves doing a bit of tracking. And I don't do these things as sort of task based that they have to do. If I use enrichment, then I use it as a chance to give them a time of self-determination where they can engage with something if they want to, and they can not engage with it if they don't want to. Instead of saying, yeah, go and seek or look for the treats or something, you're putting out things which could be interesting for them and allowing them to decide, to give them the agency and the choice to decide, am I going to, what do I find interesting? And when they found it, that they can do with it what they want to.
I love that you bring up that agency and choice, because
Mhm.
if you look at the service dog community on a whole, you see a whole lot of service dogs that are not given any agency or choice in what they do.
Yeah.
Um, and if you look at how the public perceives service dogs, that's generally how the bigger percentage of people that don't know about service dogs perceive service dogs as basic servants, slaves, doing what they're told when they're told. And I'm not alone in this. A lot of the people that I work with, a lot of the people that are helping out with this whole symposium are on the side of things of our service dogs are not servants. They're, yes, they're a member of the family. Yes, they're a team member. And it's more of that team-based lifestyle. There are a very few situations where my dogs absolutely have to do what I tell them to do, and that is generally where there's a safety concern. If they're trying to run across the road and I'm using the leash to say, no, you're not running across that road, there's a car coming, there's a safety concern, right? So most of the time, I'm asking my dogs to do things versus telling them to do things. And that is what the teamwork approach kind of leads us to, is being able to communicate. Hey, let's go do this together. Or can you do this for me? Can you bring me my drink? That's one of the tasks that my younger
Yeah.
service just loves to do right now, is to run to the kitchen and bring me a drink. And you can tell that she loves it, because when she comes back with such a happy, trotty, I found it, I got it, here you go, all tail waggy bliss. And so it's just kind of one of those things that, like, those are the kinds of tasks that I want my dog to do. And I know I jumped into tasks, which is kind of a little bit different, but tasks is one of those places where I think we have to look at the welfare of the dog and consider it when we're choosing service dog tasks. And I have a really good example of that. My very first service dog used to put some heat and pressure on my neck when the migraine was building there, and she would just lay there and hold that position for very, very, very long time. Well, when Azul was a puppy, it was easy enough to train him the task, and yeah, I could get him to do it. But you could tell he was very uneasy. Not that he didn't want to be calm, but like, he is just not. When he was super young, he was the cuddler and would just lay there forever. But about the time he hit, younger adolescence, he just wasn't a cuddler. He was too hot at that point. Weather was different. He was warmer. He's a black husky and gets overheated easily. So he would lay close, but he didn't like that position. So then I had to find other ways to meet the need that I had versus relying on my dog to do it because he simply just didn't enjoy it. And so I'm not going to ask him to do something that he's not going to enjoy. And I think, Rosie, that kind of goes into the whole thought that you were talking about. If Elizabeth would have been able to be here today, she's one of our presenters, but the safe, loved, and competent kind of feeling goes into that, in that, well, are they really just, is this something they want to do? Do they feel safe in this task? Yeah, he did. Did he feel loved in the task? Yes. Could he do it? Yes. But then we had to take on that next step of, does he want to do it? And that applies to our sport dogs and other things as well. As somebody said yesterday, in the agility ring, there are dogs that'll be running the agility ring, and you can sit back and say that dog really just does not want to be there, and the handler might miss it. So you can equate it to any kind of working position, that there are some dogs that are being asked to do jobs they just don't want to do, even fun enrichment stuff. If they don't enjoy that nose work class, why are you asking them to do it? If they love tracking, but you make it more task based and they don't love it anymore, that type of thing. Do you want to add anything along that lines with your safe, loved, and competent kind of
Well,
guideline?
yeah, it was just one of the first things that came to mind when you invited me, and thank you very much for the invitation. I've had no chance to say thank you. Because I visited a webinar a couple of weeks ago by a German vet behaviorist who works with traumatized dogs, and she was talking at one point about the kind of 3 pillars that she builds things on. And I thought this was really, really interesting because it sounds very simple, and in fact, it's extremely profound. So she said, and the important thing is that this is not about whether we feel something is safe or not. So the question is, how do we make this particular individual dog, or facilitate this particular dog to feel safe, to feel loved, and to feel competent, yeah, to feel able to do what they have to do in life, right? And I've been thinking about this ever since, because this means something potentially for different dogs. For example, to feel safe, that might mean for one dog that they have body contact to us, that they're close to us, that we can cuddle with them, or whatever. For another dog, for example, Vincent, who's very wary of strangers, the last thing he's going to feel safe with is somebody approaching him. So that's two completely different things. So it's finding out how can I help this particular dog feel safe or loved as well. What does that look like exactly? There's a lot of overlap there, I think. Yeah. And competent is our dogs can't organize things themselves, right? They're absolutely dependent on us to organize things. So that's why I found out really quickly that Vincent is brilliant with other dogs. So I go now for walks with other nice dogs, and he's also incredibly generous with dogs with fewer skills than he has. And that is where he really blossoms. He really suddenly loses this wariness. He's just really generous, a really great teacher. And so that is something where he feels really competent. And I think that builds up a dog's self-esteem. I think we can talk about that, about a dog having self-esteem, yeah, and confidence too. And from that, then I went to look, do you like water? Do you like walking in the woods, or do you prefer meadows? Those kind of things. What yeah, and I haven't actually got around to doing some tracking, but I'm going to do that very soon because I know that he does like that, and that is also quite hard work. So that I'm not going to do that every day just because I know he can do that. But I thought that was something that I just wanted to say here, and thank you for giving me the chance to do that. These three words: safe, loved, and competent. I think is so rich because it can look so different for so many different dogs. Yeah, that's really
In
cool.
my confident canines class, one of the core confidences for me is the belief in oneself. And that is really your competence pillar, right? And so, like, it's really hard for us to try to figure out if our dog is competent, if they feel that they can handle what they're doing. So, the whole goal is to set your dog up in ways that they feel like they can handle the situation that you're entering. So a brand new dog entering the training center, never before been there, they're going to have less belief that they can handle that situation unless they're a really confident dog, right? And most of my dogs coming in are not really confident when they come in, right? So they come in kind of skeptical, like, "Ooh, what's going to happen here?" You know, they don't know if it's a vet's office. They don't know what's inside. They've never been there, right? And so coming in with that kind of skepticism, my goal right away is always to give them some quick, easy wins, simple things they can do. And that might be different for every dog. And so in that class, my goal is to teach people how to, provide those simple, quick, easy wins to help your dog, boost your dog's belief in that they can handle that environment. And then, as we all know, that leads into building up environments slowly because if we just took our dog, that we just pulled out of the animal shelter or, just adopted from a rescue or whatever, the dog that we just got, and we took them to Walmart or the big mall for some service dog training, we're going to completely overwhelm them and they're going to walk in there and go, "Oh crap, I don't know what I'm doing," right? We all know that. But, looking at the idea of can we give them something they can handle? Can we set up this training session in a way that they can realize that they are safe, they are calm, and they know what to do in this situation? And maybe we can lead them down some better choice avenues by what we're setting up in the training situation. Kind of like Rosee said, they're not setting up that training session. They're there, or, if we say go out to a doctor's office or whatever with our service dog, they're not in control of the environment that we go into. We're in control of the environment. We're in control of making sure that we're preparing the right things for the right environments we're going into. So then we also need to make sure that they feel that competence entering that environment. Um, so one of the quick things that I did when Azul was younger, and it's kind of carried over now into almost all dogs I work with, I have this short little game. One of the very first skills I teach all dogs is hand targets, right? And I have this short little game that involves moving hand targets. And a hand target might be over here, and then it might be over here, and it might be up high, and it might be down low, might be behind my back, whatever it is. But it builds that little kind of fun engagement, and I know if I can't get the dog to engage in that quick, simple way, like it could be a 30-second game or it can be a 5-minute game, right? Depending on what you need, what the dog needs, and all the things that they're doing in the process, right? And what they need. But the goal is if they can play the game, they have their focus and they're ready to do whatever work you need them to do next. And if they can't play the game, you need to slow down and look at those other two pillars. Because if they can't play the game, they're not engaged and they're not in that competent zone, right? So we need to look at, are they safe? Are they happy? What else can we change? Rosee, do you have something else to add there? Because you kind of look like you did.
No, well, I just it's more people that I'm sort of very grateful to. Actually, I did my original training. I started about 13 years ago, and I worked for about 9 years with Sheila Harper. You may or may not have heard of, who's a pioneer in England, together with her colleague Winnie Berman. And I remember that a group of us who had been working with Sheila for a very long time, we had a session where she once said, she said something which really changed everything for me, the way I've worked since. And you will see me in my separation anxiety support group talking about this all the time. She just simply said, you know, we can often very much focus on what the dog can't do. And we think we ought to work on that, right? And we're focusing on what the dog can't do. But she said it can make us forget that actually, and also, of course, if you're stressed, you know, if you have a reactive dog or there's something like that, it's very easy to go, I've got to deal with this, you know, I've got to deal with it. But she said, any dog, however many problems they have, say, will have many things they can do. They will have skills they can do. And always build on that. You cannot build on a deficit. This changed everything for me because I started working more like that with my students at university where I was teaching at the time, always building on what they can do and teaching my students at that point also to describe each other's work. Instead of just describing the deficits, describing what people can build on. And that just changed my life when it came to looking for the competences and to take Vincent, because it's easier to have a kind of concrete example. What Vincent is, for example, extremely wary about anything new. I think he also has some livestock guardian dog in him. He's wary of strangers, and he's wary of new environments, and he's extremely wary of noises. But what helps him enormously, because he's so brilliant with other dogs, is if we go and we explore a new environment with another dog. And then when we go back to the environment alone without the dog, he can cope much, much better. So we often do it like that, yeah. And that really made it really conscious for me on that day where Sheila Harper said, look at what the dog can do. So
That's a really big one, and, you know, we know that whenever we need to change a behavior that we should look at, you know, not what is the dog doing and we're going to stop that behavior. It's what do we want the dog to do? You know, that's a big one in the training world. What do you want your dog to do? And we do often forget that that also applies with, you know, what does your dog want to do? And can we help them do what they want to do? And so I know Scott's presentation. Oh, go ahead, Rosie.
no, I just wanted to pick up something that Cindy has put in the chat because this kind of plays into this. She said, well, if I wasn't so ancient, I could read it without my glasses. I've found that giving Nick his sniffy time first on a walk brings him into engagement to work on some skills in the middle of the walk. He's also started initiating the look at that game when he sees some pretty distracted things. Now, this is a very interesting observation to me because what's happening is the observation that Nick is actually able to learn most in the middle part of this walk. And we also learned in my studies at that time that a walk has naturally 3 parts to it. And we all know that when the dog sort of gets out of the car, maybe we've gone to walk in the wood, they're like a bit sorry, bits kind of fit, where are we? They will also try and find their way to an object first, which is why I park backwards. So where there's a tree or a bush or even just a bin standing there, because the first thing the dog will move towards an object to orientate, right? And if they don't have to pull towards it, it's much better. And they're using that object to orientate and also perhaps if there's another dog around to communicate as a barrier. And then they sort of say, oh, right, we're here. I know who's here and we can do this. And then this middle part where they are really this fidgety bit stops and they're really investigating the environment and getting involved with the environment. And then there comes a point where they start investigating the environment less, sniffing a bit less, and they're getting a little bit sort of tired, also maybe tired of making their own decisions, and they will start to look at you more, and um, and then they need more input, right? And I just thought it was really interesting, this this observation from Cindy, that to fit in with the natural rhythm of her dog.
Mm-hmm.
The middle
Exactly.
part of the walk is where this two-way communication is easiest for both sides. Sorry, I didn't want to say too much,
No,
but
no, that is like super important, and that's why we always advocate for letting your dog have that time to sniff outside before entering a building. Even older dogs, they may not need as much time as younger dogs. You know, well-experienced dogs may not need as much time, and they may not need to actually use the bathroom, which is what we would usually be cueing them to do in that time if they need to. But they still need that time just to, you know, shake off whatever happened in the car, move on to the new situation, and get prepared for what's coming next. Even if they know what to expect when going inside, they still need that moment of transition, right? And so for me, like I do the same thing. I always try to park near something tall so that when I give my dogs the cue to get out of the car, they have something that they can race to that's going to be within the amount of leash that I have on them so that they can race to that spot and sniff it while while they both get out of the car, while they get adjusted, and while whether I have one or two, but that way they have that moment to just adapt to the environment, and then we don't move from that spot until they say, hey, yeah, we're ready to move. We're ready to go. What spot are we going to next, mom? And kind of that check in. So, Scott, I know that in our chat that goes on this day, we talked a lot about enrichment and how that can lead to connection. And so the major part of the chat is there. But do you want to talk a little bit about the welfare side of things that enrichment can provide for both us and our dog when we're doing it together? Just briefly, because I know we talked about it really long in the chat.
Yeah, so like the enrichment aspect of it, like Rosie says, once the dogs feel recognized, that you'll listen and you can start doing things with your dogs. Like Roxy and I decided we know how to hunt together for lizards. We also live out in the desert, so we get a few and we lose a lot, but we're not hunting everything. So we can go look for stuff. She stops and looks at flowers with me, knowing I'm not looking for a lizard. Um, but when we start to realize that throughout all of the dog human relationship, it's always been about, at minimal, teamwork. It could be companionship, and companionship's extremely important. The relationship is extremely important. And to me, it's so important that anything else is secondary. So we can engage with our dogs or ask questions with our dogs or include them in things that we are interested in as well. Like if I'm cleaning, I'm not going to put my dog away. We're going to hang out and we're going to communicate, whether it's how it'd be getting used to the vacuum, whether it's things that we can actually just do together that let them know you're not alone. I'm not going to leave you when you're upset. Because a lot of the times the enrichment isn't always just about what's going to enrich their life or positively, but things, even when something negative happens, it's through my dogs that I really started to realize almost every training video on working with the vacuum is wrong. Everybody puts the vacuum to the dog when dogs prefer, even when it's off, they're vacuuming towards the dog. That's a threat. But almost every reactive dog, when they have an opportunity, when they're listened to, like Rosie says, they would rather put it's them, you, and trigger. And you switch it around. As long as they're more likely to get over it, be more. These are minimizing what I'm really thinking of, because like dogs are upset. They can be upset without having to act out. But if they find something that's triggering, and you can put yourself in between them, between that and the other thing, they will still be wary because the stress neurochemicals don't stop. If it's there, they're going to slow down, but it's going to go to a different mindset, but they're going to feel protected. And then when it's done, then you can recover. You might be able to play it off, or you might be able to, the dog could be so exhausted, not so exhausted. Now I'm going to the other side of the dramatics, minimizing now, I'm exaggerating, but they may want to just go sit with you on the couch. Some dogs, when they're had a great day with you and you got multiple dogs, you're sitting on one side of the couch and the dog's cuddling with you, and the other dog comes and goes, "Oh, cool, cuddle time." And when you tell the other dog to stop, that dog goes, "Oh, I'm safe," and then just can kind of relax. So it's the I don't know if that's making any sense or exactly what you're asking for, but
Oh, it is, totally, and I mean, that's just it, and you make me think of the example with Azul and the Bigfoot statue, and so Bigfoot is really a popular theme in my area, and there are Bigfoot statues everywhere.
I'm
One
in the
time,
desert, same thing.
yeah, we came across one where we didn't I didn't know it was there the first time we came across it, right? And of course, Bigfoot is man-like, taller than me, the statue is, and it's kind of hunched over in like an attack position, right? And so Azul kind of gets out of, we had just got out of the car. He walks past it sideways first, not seeing it. And then he kind of like looks over his shoulder and does that double take of, holy crap, what is that? Right. And so, of course, he was on a long line. We were, just in a sniffy area. There was a nice grassy area there to sniff. So he was on a long line. And so I let him have his length and I kind of just stayed put to where I was at. I wasn't like super close to it at that point. I was probably about 20 feet away from it, and he could go up to it or he could go 20 feet the opposite direction. And so he chose first, to go a little bit further away to where the taller grass was, where he could sniff, he could check things out. He'd look at the statue, go back to sniffy, look at me, look at the statue, kind of bounce back and forth between the three. And slowly he decided when he was ready to come up to me, and when he did, I'm like, okay, I'm going to go closer now. And he's like, okay. He stood his ground, let me go closer. And then he came a little closer. And then he let me go closer and he came a little closer. And we worked our way up to the statue and I touched the statue and he's still like, he did eventually sit by the statue. And he wasn't totally comfortable with that sit, but he had already smelled it, he had already touched it, he had already pawed at it and knew it wasn't going to move, right? It was
Yeah.
carved out of a great big tree, so it was all log and it wasn't going anywhere. And I'm sure it had lots of animal smells on it because I'm sure many, many dogs had peed on it in the past. But yeah, so I
Yeah.
mean, it was kind of one of those things that sometimes we can work through that and sometimes it's more of the point of, no, we really shouldn't work through it at this point. We should just leave, maybe make a note of it and work through it on a different day. Or maybe, we're never going to see that again. So we don't have to worry about it.
And the other thing too is, with you being so far on that line, and he spotted it when you've already gone past it, so you couldn't really do anything. But the fact that he didn't like it, his autonomous nervous system says, I'm going to create a distance, I'm going to go smell the grass, and I'm going to check it out again. This is what naturally happens in every single mammal at minimum. Get the research done on. If you can leave and you get to de-stress. When what Rosee was saying, one of the things about the walks when you pull up somewhere, and I walk dogs. I used to walk dogs for a living, and I love doing it. It's one of my favorite things. And I walk groups of dogs in San Francisco, Alone Land. But what we would do is when we get somewhere, yes, we go potty because everybody's excited. You're not picking up every single dog in the exact same neighborhood. Traffic's never the same, and it's never all green lights, right? And you don't know if you're picking up from the housekeeper. Does the dog love the housekeeper? Sometimes you have to get the dog from a different bedroom, and da 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 da. So some dogs are in the car longer than others. So we go. I find a spot where they can go potty, and then once they sniff, and especially if like in San Francisco, it's a 7 by 7 square city, right? So if you're late, you're probably gonna have to go somewhere else. For all the parking lots are probably full. So you're probably gonna have to spend another 10, 15 minutes. So you got like 2 or 3 backups in your head already. And if you find free parking, you take it and just deal with it there. That way you don't have to worry about anything. But anyways, so when we go to somewhere, especially somewhere new, and people like to hike and everything else, when I go somewhere with the dogs, we let them out, go potty, let them smell, because adrenaline and the stress neurochemicals are dissipating. Once they go to the bathroom, they're going to feel better. If we're somewhere new, we go for a walk a little bit because they're going to be gathering all that information. Maybe it is that dog they peed on the tree with and they smell 3 or 4 different spots and they're all liking whatever dog they like. And then we'll start to go back to the car, because once you go out, you're gathering information. It's just like we do the exact same thing. We pull into a parking lot. Where's the safest place? Where am I? Who's the car? The closer we get to our goal, the higher our stress neurochemicals will increase. Or depending if we like the place enough, we'll actually say, oh, cool, we're here. Yay, our goal is almost accomplished. So when we get to someplace new, or we're getting to our place, they know the routine. They can go potty. They can burn off the energy, and then or gather more information. Who was here? Who was here? Was there a coyote? Was there a cat? We'll go for a little bit of a walk, and I don't mean far at all. And then we'll start to walk back. Then you'll start to see the dogs process the information, and then we can actually have better communication because they don't need to gather all their information to feel safer in the environment. They've learned it. When you go back, everything is familiar. As soon as you turn around, everything is familiar. So just like with Azul, using that with, he's already walked so far with that Bigfoot, and he goes over and smells. And then he can come check things out, and he can back up, and he starts to feel a little bit more confident. Being able to escape and move forward builds confidence, increases oxytocin. So that's enriching in itself, because he can, my whole point is it's enriching in itself without him having to come find us, or you have to be in the middle of it, or things like that. So, and he trusted himself and you, he knew where you were at, a high state of arousal. You know where your safety is at. And his safety was going to the grass. Mom was too far away. She's not the positive option, but she's here. So he knows you can take care of it with him when he's ready. But in the moment he wasn't ready, but letting him learn it on his own, he knows you're there. Period. He's on the long line. He walked in there with you. He watched you walk past it probably, and then it just triggered on him, going, "Wait a minute, why is it there?" He might have picked it up subconsciously, without whatever, but maybe not. But he knows his environment. He knows where you were there, even though he was stressed, and he knows you'll take care of it while you're either dealing with Bigfoot or you're dealing with him, and you're acknowledging all that. So even though he learned it on his own in the beginning to deal with that stress and those triggers, he still knew that you were going to help him take care of all that. So you're adding upon his own learning of how to stay safe using fight or flight, right? But that doesn't mean that's going to keep him triggered. Like, he doesn't have to love Bigfoot, because you're not having it's not like you're going there every single day and you must have your doctor's appointment by Bigfoot every single day. That was just kind of a novelty as far as we're concerned. But he knows
We
that it
still
can
haven't
be
been
there.
back to that place, but we have seen multiple other Bigfoots. But yeah, we've never been back to that place just because it was one of those rare kind of tourist stop places.
Exactly. And it could have been, that was the safest thing to bark at with everything new in that environment. Sometimes dogs will go, I'm going to yell at that because I'm too triggered and I need to de-stress myself, which is also enrichment. We don't like to see it that way, but that's the way the brain will say, I might have been trigger stacked, and this is letting me out so I can kind of get back to a normal, so I can survive in my new environment, because I don't know what's going on, but I still need to process this because mom's still working. So we still got to do this teamwork thing. And then again, the recovery from the stress. Because I know you didn't leave them. Just knowing you, I know you didn't go, okay, hang out with Bigfoot. I'll be back next week.
Right.
And then letting him out to go potty and then playing with him or whatever else needs he has. So through all those little stressors is all things that Neil deGrasse Tyson said it best. In school, you may never use trigonometry. Or actually, let's back it up. I don't think I took trigonometry, but I took algebra. You may never use it again, but just by you solving that one puzzle has given you a bunch more ways in your brain, not the formula, because you'll probably forget the formula, and that's only for one problem. Different ways to problem solve for the rest of your life, even though you'll never use, algebra again or whatever. That, once you do that, that does so much more for your brain processing and enriching your brain. Even if you didn't like it and it was hard, it does more for your brain than actually just studying it constantly and needing to do it. Does that make sense? It's like, even if you never
Totally.
use it again, just using that once, just learning it that one time has given so much intrinsic, or whatever you want to,
The
rewards that
intrinsic
you can't even
motivation.
think of.
Yeah. And it's kind of that catch of, we know that sometimes we want to build some repetition in certain skills that we're trying to train, but we're not necessarily looking at behavior skills we're training in this moment. We're looking at survival, life, brain, brain making decision power. And so you don't have to solve the same puzzle over and over, but every time you solve a different puzzle or challenge in life, your brain becomes more adept to problem solving. It's basically what you're saying. Um, so I do want to say,
Thank
like
you.
in the beginning of this, we kind of skipped over some general welfare concepts. Like we all know that it's important to feed it your dog and make sure they have water and make sure they have regular vet care. And that all applies into welfare. And we kind of jumped right into more of the emotional welfare. So I want to talk just a minute on our last emotional welfare topic, which is super relevant to the service dog world. Um, and that is the emotional for both human and dog when we come across, and I'm just going to call them an undertrained team because most of us know what that means. So a dog that maybe shouldn't be in public or isn't prepared to be where they're at and does that barky, lungy thing at us. And that kind of emotional impact that has not only on our dogs, but on us as well. So if you watch the service dog community at all, you know that there is a huge amount of service dogs that end up retiring early because they were attacked at some stage in the game. Like it's one of the things we have to deal with. It just happens, right? Whether that happens in a work environment or a walk environment or a play environment. So I just want to kind of go, we know it's going to happen. We know it's a problem, right? We don't need to address the problem per se, because we can't always change how those other people train their dogs, right? What I want to look at is can we leave our people with some skills that maybe they can help to get past that issue if it happens to them, because it's one that we hear over and over again. So what can we tell them to, when something like that is scary, that's traumatic, that pushes us both out of our, so we're not in our safety pillar anymore, what can we do as a team? And just short, quick and sweet, because I know that's not a short topic, but we're already a little bit past time. We'll probably go for another 15 minutes. So does anybody have any advice they want to share there? Go ahead,
I'll
Scott.
quick, I'll quickly jump in. I'll make it as quick as possible. Reconnection, because one of the biggest things that helps with the stress is in the traumatic events is when you can reconnect with your trusted source. A lot of times, I mean, just seeing at the dog park, puppy gets attacked by an older dog's confident, goes, haha, I beat him up. And I go to the puppy, dog has pissed and pooped all over me, is all excited because I'm the first one there to greet him because the parents are a little bit behind. I get the pee and the poo and the excitement kisses. Oh my God, you saved my life. Da, 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 da. The dramatics. And the parents want to yell at the other person, at the other dog. And I have to go, hold on, hold on, hold on. Your dog is so happy to see you right now. Go pay attention to your dog. Or people will leave the dog park. Or they're so upset, so scared that they get, and it makes sense. You want out. And absolutely get out, but don't leave. Your brain and you need to reconnect. You're just like Azul. That's a great example with Azul. When he saw the scary thing, went over to smell and take care of something. Once you get away from that danger, your body's starting to feel better. And maybe you do get angry. When you do get angry, you can vent that, but also be mindful that your dog is there with you and hang out with your dog. Go play with your dog. Go burn that stress off. Maybe your dog will. If your dog wants to cuddle, if your dog's trying to lean into you, if they're looking to you, if they are looking to you with fear in their eyes, they are actually asking you for comfort and emotional support. You are their trusted source. Granted, this is with the relationship first. If they are asking for your help, they're begging you with those puppy dog eyes or that fearful eyes, that is not the time to leave. That is the time to reconnect with your dog. If you have to pause your own healing in that moment, do it. Hang out with your dog, cuddle with them, maybe say, okay, I got you. We're going to the car where it's a little bit safer, or we're going to the back end of the parking lot, or we're going to the other side of the car. We're going to the other. Come on, we're going over here. And then spend that quality time with your dog. That recovery is going to minimize, it's going to make that be less of a traumatic event. Kids do it to us all the time. Dogs will always do it to us. And you'll see when it happens with puppies and free living dogs, when things get scary, they go back to their social safety. But because we have to be on a leash with our dogs while we're doing stuff and something happens, it's just us. And usually with a young team, we're very controlling because we want to make sure it's right. And I don't mean controlling as in like we're learning, we're trying to figure all this out. So we're cognitively trying to figure things out. Our dogs are still going to be emotional. They're not like, okay, yeah, step by step. Yeah, this is a good one, mom, dad. This, yeah, I like this. This is good. Oh no, we got scared. No, they're like, okay, we're doing this. Mom and dad have got this. We're doing this together. Something scary happens. They're still going to do what's natural to relieve that stress and try to find you at some point. And if they don't, then please go find your dog and go relax. Go hang out with them until they feel comfortable enough to show you that you matter, that they're ready to recover from you. Because getting back to social
Find
aspect of
your
it is
dog.
healing. Sorry.
Sorry, I don't mean to interrupt, but by find your dog, he means connect with, mentally find them, not go search to whatever room they're in or, wherever they wandered off to. He means mentally go find your dog. Be with them and connected emotionally.
Yeah,
You
well,
did.
I do mean go to the room with your dog. I mean, you can sit there with
Oh,
them too if they've run off. But yeah, it's that's different. But it's I want to make sure that you actually get to where uh uh your dog's more likely, even if they don't, they're gonna want to look for you at some point. So it's no different than us being so scared. And then when we get home, then we relive the event. We call a friend. Our dogs don't get to call a friend. We are their friend. And through that stress is going to help them understand that I am emotionally available to you. To let you be emotionally vulnerable, I am here for you. And the sooner after that traumatic event that happens, traumatizing event, it's going to lessen the connections in the brain. One of the biggest healing things is social structures, social support, and dogs have us. So sometimes we have to pause our own emotions, take care of the dog. Then as soon as we get in our car, before we go, we can call our friend. Even use your own dog. I've used my first service dog. I didn't have very many friends that I thought I could call. Apparently I did. I didn't realize it. So me and my dog, that was us. If I was upset, I talked to him. If I helped, if something happened to him, I was there for him. We were honest and authentic with each other. And if anything happened, we had each other. But that's why it's good to have a circle for you too. I'm done. I gotta shut up.
no, you're good. And I think that is super important that that we do take that time to connect. And the reason I say you didn't mean go find your dog, because I'm thinking more of like in a public setting. And in this situation, we very much advocate for 99.9% of service dog handlers can use a leash of some sorts, and their dog should not be escaping them in public situations. So they are there. You didn't lose them, but you may have temporarily lost that emotional connection that you have with them. So you sometimes we do need to seek that out. The
You're
dog
right.
might
You're
be
right.
sitting in the car with you, but we can sit in the car and totally ignore our dogs, or we can sit in the car and seek that connection with them, right? And so that's kind of where I was coming from. And so we do have some good examples in the chat too from other people that will use, different games, different focus things, arriving early to a situation, making sure dogs have lots of time to de-stress before going into a work environment, and different games that they can play before going into that environment, or if they need to take a break in between different things in an environment. So that can be that really helpful connection piece. And with that, Rosie, do you have something that you want to add, like something that you just love to do to help dog and human de-stress after something negative?
If there's something negative happen, I think it's exactly right what Scott says, that they need us. And I think sometimes we have a kind of flight response with the first thing we need to do is just get our dog in the car and leave. And sometimes I found that if something upsetting happens, then and the other people leave, and assuming you're in a safe situation now, okay, I've often find that it's really useful to have just a little wander around this place where that happened and have a sniff it and stuff like, and come down and find that connection again there, because it helps mitigate the problem that if you have to go back there at some time in the future, that your dog isn't immediately remembering this awful thing that actually, okay, was awful, assuming that nobody's been hurt or there isn't any acute danger right now, is not to just say, right, I've got to get out of here with my dog as fast as possible, but just have a little wander around and try and reinvest this place with something more positive to end on, if it's possible. I've often found that that's really useful, because sometimes we just want to get out of there, but maybe, if you wander around, dogs are very forgiving, and depending on how resilient the dog is and what happened, there's so many variables in there. But sometimes you can have a little just wander and make this place not quite so negatively associated as it was, yeah. And if you just leave on this terrible note.
I tried really hard to do that with my younger dogs to teach them that we could do that. So exit first to be safe, exit as far back as we need to be safe. And once
Yeah.
that safety is there, when the danger that was there leaves, then let's go investigate. And,
Yeah.
so we kind of teach them how to do that. I do. I teach my dogs how to do that when they're young, because that makes them want to exit more with me. When they know we can come back and explore when it's safe, when they know that we will get that chance, then they're more willing to, oh, mom says we need to exit. Let's exit now. And having that exit strategy kind of in place. Scott, you had something to add?
Yeah, what Rosie says is great, and I do it too. Um, like you say, Penny, go get safe. We're gonna go get safe. And then because we still have that stress neurochemicals, and this helps in the brain too, because your stress neurochemicals helps you learn. Period. Not staying calm helps you learn. Like it's so you already have it coursing. And yes, if the dog says no, we're not going back, absolutely do not go back. But if you can, like I said, we de-stress with the dog, and we can see if we can go back, and maybe we'll play in front of the store where the event happened, and then we can cuddle. And usually the dog will go around and start smelling around and start to reassess the environment. I tell people, period, and speaking of enrichment, you're walking with a friend. What would you do if you walked with your best friend or your spouse and something negative happened right there? You're not just going to leave and throw them in the back seat and then bitch and complain to everybody else. You're going to take care of your spouse, possibly defend them, but also understand that I'm going to protect you. I don't really want to fight, because at the same time, I got to take care of you if it's possible. Because I've seen many times where I've gone to go fight somebody, and the person I'm trying to fight for gets mad at me because I'm not taking care of their emotional need, right? I'm
Mm-hmm.
not there for them. My child told me that. You don't even, I didn't want you to do that. I don't trust you now. Oh, I thought I was doing the right thing. I ruined that one, so I had to make up with that relationship. We still have a relationship.
We all make
Um,
mistakes.
We all make mistakes, but the recovery and understanding. So, with that high state of time of need, I told you something that's important. And, dads, we're going to get upset. We want to go hurt our kid. We want to do some damage, but it's not appropriate. That's not the right thing to do. We got to listen and acknowledge and help them feel safe. Then maybe we can go take it on differently or some way. But with, like, if I'm walking with my dog, who's my friend, my teammate, my that I'm going to, something happens, I'm going to protect them to make sure nothing else is going to happen while still making sure they know that they're safe. And if we need to leave, yes, we'll leave. And then we'll go, are you good? Are you okay? And I'm not going to check for wounds right away, because the brain, if my dog is in its sympathetic nervous system, action, fight or flight, and it's moving around, touch is not a great idea. But they're listening, because that state of arousal still keeps you listening and learning in your environment to stay safe. Dopamine, adrenaline, norepinephrine, all those, and cortisol. But once it spikes, once everything starts to slowly, the you see everything start to slow down, then it's time for emotional recovery. You good? And you can still be upset. You can still be defensive. You good? You okay? And they'll actually want to just show you, I'm okay, but let's go over around the car. I want to go look at it. We're not going back to it. I'm sorry, child. I'm not comfortable going back because I'm still stressed, but let's go walk, let's go walk near it. You can look at it. You can smell. Let's just go hang out and then go ahead and walk away from it. And then doing this stuff together so they can see what that stress was. Kids will do it. They'll get mad and get scared. And then, but I want to go see it. You do realize we almost died, and you want to go see that scary thing again. I am not
Cindy
comfortable with
made a
that.
point in the comments as well, about, sometimes we can teach or put on cue some behaviors that can help in calming. So for Azul specifically, and I know she does this with Nick as well, but so for Azul specifically, he's the husky that likes to stare, which often causes other dogs to be triggered because his stare is so intense. So giving Azul the look away cue, he doesn't need to look at me. He doesn't need to focus on me. He just needs to break eye contact with that dog, which usually means he needs to go sniff something, because Azul would prefer to sniff than to interact with me in that moment, because he's keyed up. He's there waiting to hear me. He's listening for that, okay, now you can look cue to follow up. Because as soon as that dog looks away and is no longer staring, then Azul can stare all he wants, right? As long as they're not staring at each other, which is where that look away cue comes in. So teaching them, all right, so I know you're excited about the dog. I know you want to watch them, but go sniff. All right, now you can look at the dog again. Okay, go sniff. So he's kind of doing that relaxing behavior in the middle, and that's keeping him from getting over aroused at seeing that dog. So it's kind of helping him learn how to self-regulate his behaviors a little bit too. So she suggests behaviors like sniffing, the play bows, which are very appeasing behaviors to many others, and the shake it off, which is a cue that we tend to think of as a, let's get the hair out in the appropriate places and not the inappropriate places like a restaurant. But it's also important to have that shake off, to, like, if you're seeing your dog being visibly stressed and they have that shake off kind of cue, to give them that so that they will just, all right, I can breathe now. I can shake off. I can relax. We can move on. That startle wasn't anything major. We can ignore it. Rosee, did you have something you wanted to add about dealing with stressful situations there?
I don't think so. No, I've just been having a quick look in the chat.
So we are actually an hour and a half in, so we're gonna wrap up here. If you have additional welfare concerns, and I mean, we could address, and that's going to be a later conversation, various welfare concerns of the service dog community, including, the toxic nature of judgment and all of that. Those are conversations to be had later on. Today, we really wanted to focus on that team welfare of making sure your team, you and your dog, are the best you can possibly be. So we hope that we did that a little bit. Scott has something else to add before we take off. Go ahead.
I have one more, and it's one of the most natural signs, one of the most researched things that comes naturally from dogs. It was found and researched in dogs as far as breathing techniques. It's called a psychological sigh.
Mm-hmm.
2 sharp inhales and a big exhale. When you start to see these with your dogs, kids that are crying, same thing. Kids that are having tantrums, when you see these in your dogs, the most obvious one is when they go to bed. They're done with the day's stress, but it happens to all of us. We do it too. We just don't recognize it. You don't have to teach a dog to do this, but if you start to recognize your dog's breathing patterns and you start to see the bigger exhales, you start to recognize how your dog's breathing. This is at least 100-year-old research
Mm-hmm.
that's been coming back to light, but it's one of the most basic. Every mammal does it.
Some
We
of
do a
us
double.
taught our dogs to be able to do it on a mimicking cue. You know, you
Well,
see
the
me, you do it.
psychological side happens naturally.
Yes, yes. And I mean, they will do it naturally, right? Totally. But sometimes we can get them to do it a little bit sooner, like when they're getting that point of they're almost ready to do it anyways. We can get them to do it a little bit sooner by doing it with them. You know, that kind of connection of I take that deep breath, you take that deep breath. And it can help them
Yeah, and that's
recover a little bit quicker to some
yeah.
situation.
When they recognize that there's you still can recognize when they're able to be social. Those subtle cues of that we talked about before, where they're still wanting our help and still listening for us for the help. Absolutely, it helps too.
Mhm. So with that, we will kind of end here. We hope you enjoyed it. We hope you definitely listen to the other conversations of the day that were pre-recorded. We have Elizabeth talk on calming signals. We have Scott and mine talk on connection. And then we have Danielle Beck and her talk with me on on welfare in general and kind of like paying attention to our dog's needs. So we hope you are enjoying the Service Dog Symposium so far and tune back in tomorrow for day 3 where we look at um kind of it's the idea of making hard decisions that happen to all service dog handlers is our theme tomorrow.
Thank you for your amazing work. I mean, it's absolutely brilliant what you're getting off the ground here and opening up for so many dogs. It's brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you. We are trying. Everybody have a great day.